The December dawn was especially cold, with a light drizzle that made the streets of the outskirts even more empty and melancholy. Marcos dried his hands on the old cloth he always carried in the pocket of his worn jeans, watching the almost non-existent movement on the street through the fogged window of his small house. It was Christmas Eve, one of the most difficult days for him since his wife, Anna, died of complications during childbirth 2 years earlier, leaving him alone to raise little Julia, now 3 years old. At 29, Marcos had learned to cherish every moment of peace. He worked as a night security guard at a public hospital and during the day cared for Julia, who was currently fast asleep in her small room. The house was simple, just 2 rooms in a working-class neighborhood, but it was clean and filled with the love he dedicated to his daughter. It wasn't much, but it paid the bills and allowed him to be there whenever Julia needed him. Marcos smiled as he thought of a daughter. Julia had her mother's green eyes and a smile that could light up any dark room. She was a smart, affectionate child, always asking questions about where her mother was and when she would return. Sometimes Marcos found himself wondering how different things would be if Anna was still there, if they could raise their daughter together, if he didn't have to make all the decisions alone and carry all the responsibility on his shoulders. The sound of a baby crying pulled him from his melancholy thoughts. At first he thought it was Julia, but soon realized the sound was coming from outside. Curious and concerned, he opened the front door and found a sight he would never forget. A wicker basket sat on his doorstep, and inside it, wrapped in a worn pink blanket, lay a desperately crying newborn baby. Marcos looked around, searching for someone, but the street was completely deserted. The baby was clearly very small, perhaps a few days old, and shivering from the cold. Without hesitation, he picked up the basket and carried it inside, quickly closing the door to protect the child from the freezing wind blowing outside. "My God," he murmured, peering more closely at the baby. It was a girl, clearly premature, with delicate features and the still pink skin of newborns. With her was only an empty bottle and a shaky note. "Please take care of her, I can't. Her name is Hope." Marcos felt his heart sink. He knew despair when he saw it, and that note overflowed with anguish and pain. Someone had made the hardest decision of their life, giving up their own child. He gently picked up the baby, and she stopped crying immediately, as if recognizing she was safe. "Julia," he called softly, going to his daughter's room. "Julia, wake up, daughter." The girl opened her eyes sleepily. "Daddy, what happened?" Then she saw the baby and her eyes widened. "It's a baby! Where did he come from?" "She's Julia. She's a girl. Someone left her on our doorstep because she needed help," Marcos explained, sitting on the bed next to his daughter. "Her name is Esperanza." Julia approached curiously, gently touching the baby's hand. "She's so little, Daddy. Why would anyone leave a baby alone?" Marcos chose his words carefully. Sometimes people go through very difficult times and can't care for their babies as they would like. They do this because they love them very much and want their children to have a better life. "Are we going to take care of her?" Julia asked, with the innocence typical of children. Marcos looked at the 2 girls, the daughter he loved more than life itself, and the baby who had appeared as an unexpected gift on Christmas Eve. He knew he should call social services, that there were protocols for situations like this, but he also knew how the system worked. He'd seen enough stories at the hospital where he worked. "For now, yes," he said finally. "We'll take care of her until we decide what's best for her." The first few days were a whirlwind of adjustment. Marcos had to quickly learn how to care for a newborn, something he'd lost when Anna died shortly after Julia's birth. He bought formula, diapers, and baby clothes with the little money he'd saved for Julia's Christmas. The girl, in turn, proved to be a natural big sister, always eager to help feed and change Esperanza. During his research at the health center, Marcos discovered that the baby was perfectly healthy, just slightly underweight. The doctor, Dr. Santana, a kind man who knew Marcos's history, advised him on the necessary care and didn't ask many questions about the child's origins. "You're doing a wonderful job," Dr. Santana said during a consultation. "This baby was lucky to find you." "I'm the lucky one," Marcos replied, watching Esperanza sleep peacefully in his arms. "She brought light back into our home." And it was true. Since Esperanza's arrival, the house had been filled with a different energy. Julia was more cheerful, having someone to care for and protect. Marcos felt more complete, as if a missing part had been filled. The baby rarely cried, was calm, and seemed to be developing well under his care. Weeks passed without any news about Esperanza's biological mother. Marcos had discreetly asked neighbors if they had seen any pregnant women in the area, but no one knew anything. He began to get used to the idea that Esperanza might stay with them permanently. It was then that everything changed. A month after meeting Esperanza, Marcos was returning from work when he saw a black luxury car parked in front of his house. Two men in suits were standing on the sidewalk, clearly out of place in this humble neighborhood. Marcos's heart raced, sensing trouble. "Are you Marcos Silva?" one of the men asked, showing an identification card that Marcos couldn't read properly in his haste. "Yes, it's me. What do you want?" "We need to talk about the child in your care." "May we come in?" Marcos hesitated, but realized he had no choice. He led them inside, where Julia was playing on the floor while Esperanza slept on the sofa, nestled in pillows. "Is that her?" the second man asked, pointing to the baby. "Who's asking? What do you want?" The first man introduced himself. "I'm Roberto Mendez, lawyer for the Carvalho family. This is Senator Eduardo Carvalho's missing granddaughter." Marcos felt his world spin. Senator Eduardo Carvalho was one of the most powerful politicians in the state, known for his influence and wealth. "This is impossible. This baby was abandoned on my doorstep. There's no connection to—" "Yes, there is," Roberto interrupted, pulling some papers from his briefcase. "The senator's daughter, Marina Carvalho, disappeared 2 months ago. She was pregnant against her family's wishes. We have reason to believe she gave birth and abandoned the child." "Where's Mom?" Marcos asked, feeling a knot in his stomach. The men exchanged glances. "Marina passed away 3 weeks ago in a public hospital overdose. We've only just been able to trace her last steps, and they lead to this neighborhood." Marcos looked at Esperanza, who was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the storm brewing around her. "What do you want?" "We want to bring the senator's granddaughter home, where she belongs. The Carvalho family can offer her everything she deserves: quality education, medical care, and a prosperous future." "What if I say no?" Roberto smiled coldly. "You have no choice. Technically, you're keeping a child without legal permission. We can resolve this amicably, or we can involve the authorities." Marcos felt cornered. He knew he didn't have the resources to fight a powerful family like the Carvalhos. But the thought of handing Esperanza over to people who didn't even know her made him desperate. "Can I at least meet her grandfather? I want to make sure she's well taken care of." The lawyers hesitated but agreed. "The senator agrees to meet you tomorrow in his office." "But the child is coming with us today." "No," Marcos said firmly. "She's going with me tomorrow, or you'll have to take her by force, and I guarantee it won't be discreet." After a tense discussion, they agreed that Marcos could take Esperanza to the meeting the next day. That night, Marcos couldn't sleep. He held Esperanza in his arms for hours, memorizing every detail of her little face, every sound she made. Julia had cried when she learned that her little sister might be leaving. Daddy, why does she have to go? She's our family now, Julia had asked through tears. Marcos didn't know what to say. How do you explain the complexities of social class, political power, and legal rights to a 3-year-old? The next day, dressed in his best clothes and carrying Esperanza in a stroller borrowed from his neighbor, Marcos headed to the imposing building that housed Senator Carvalho's office. The difference between his world and this one was stark. Marble, crystal, security guards on every corner. Senator Eduardo Carvalho was a man in his 60s, with graying hair, an imposing bearing, and a penetrating gaze. When Marcos entered his luxurious office, carrying Esperanza, he saw something he hadn't expected, emotion in the politician's eyes. "Is this her?" the senator asked, approaching slowly. "Yes, sir. This is Hope." "Hope?" The man repeated the name tenderly. "She looks a lot like Marina when she was a baby." Marcos watched as the senator looked at his granddaughter with tears in his eyes. For a moment he saw not the powerful politician, but a grieving grandfather who had lost his daughter and now found one last connection with her. "Sir," Marcos said carefully, "I know you have rights over her, but you need to know that she is not just an inheritance or an object. She is a child who needs love, care, and stability." The senator looked at him with renewed interest. "Tell me about yourself, Marcos. How did you find her?" Marcos told the whole story. The cold night, the abandoned baby, the weeks of care, how Julia had grown attached to her little sister, how Esperanza had brought joy back to their home after the loss of Anna. "Do you have a daughter?" the senator asked. "I have. Julia, 3 years old. My wife died in childbirth 2 years ago." The senator was silent for a long moment. "And what do you want, Marcos? Money? A better job? A bigger house?" The question offended Marcos, but he maintained his composure. "I want Esperanza to be happy and loved. If you can guarantee that, then she should stay with her family. But if she's just a trophy or a way to redeem the loss of your daughter, then perhaps she'd be happier in a simple family that loves her unconditionally." The senator seemed surprised by the answer. "Would you give me my granddaughter if I promised to love her?" "I would do what was best for her," Marcos replied without hesitation. "What if I told you I want you to keep taking care of her?" Marcos blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "Marina was rebellious, independent, and didn't conform to the expectations of our social class. She ran away from home at 18 and cut off contact with us. I never understood what she wanted from life." The senator paused, looking out the window. Maybe she wanted exactly this: a simple family, true love, a life without the pressures and expectations we Carvalhos carry. "Senator, I don't understand. You showed me more love for my granddaughter in 1 hour than I have shown my own daughter in years. Marina chose to leave Hope at your doorstep, not at the door of any rich or influential person. Perhaps she knew something I am only beginning to understand." Marcos remained silent, trying to process the senator's words. "I want to propose something different," the senator continued. "I want you to continue raising Esperanza, but as part of the Carvalho family, I will take care of all her financial needs, education, healthcare, housing. In return, I ask only to be part of her life as a grandfather. And the legal issue? My lawyers will take care of everything. You will become Esperanza's legal guardian, with my full support and blessing." Marcos looked at the baby in his arms, who was watching him with curious little eyes. "Why would you do that?" "Because I failed Marina as a father. I pushed her so hard to be the perfect daughter that she ran away from me. I don't want to make the same mistake with my granddaughter. I want her to grow up knowing the true love that you and your daughter can offer, but I also want to be present in her life. What if in the future you change your mind? I will have legal documents prepared guaranteeing your rights as guardian. Additionally, you will have sufficient resources to defend yourself legally if necessary. It was a tempting proposal, but Marcos had doubts. Senator, I appreciate the offer, but I don't want Esperanza to grow up torn between two worlds. She needs stability. Then we'll find a middle ground. How about I build you and your family a house in a better but not ostentatious neighborhood? A place where hope can grow safely, but without losing the simplicity you value? Marcos considered the proposal. It would mean a better life for Julia and Esperanza, quality education and financial security. But it would also mean accepting help from a wealthy and powerful family, something that went against his principles of independence. I need time to think, he said finally. Of course. But in the meantime, please continue to take care of her and at least agree to me covering her diaper, formula, and medical expenses. Marcos reluctantly agreed. Over the next few days, he spoke at length with Dr. Santana, some trusted neighbors, and even with Julia, trying to explain the situation in terms she could understand. If Esperanza is rich, will she still be our sister? Julia asked with the simple logic of children. Always, daughter. Family is not about money. It's about love. So it doesn't matter if she's rich or poor. His daughter's childlike wisdom made him smile. No, daughter, it doesn't matter. A week later, Marcos got his answer. He called the senator and they arranged a second meeting, this time at a neutral restaurant. I accept your proposal, Marcos said, but with some conditions. Say. First, Esperanza must grow up knowing the truth about her origins, but in a way appropriate for her age. Second, all important decisions about her education and upbringing go through me. First. Third, if at any time I feel that your presence is detrimental to her well-being, I have the right to limit contact. The senator reflected. These are fair conditions, I accept, but I also have one condition. Which? I want you to allow me to be more than just a financial provider. I want to learn to be the grandfather I never was. Marcos held out his hand. I accept. The following months were a time of adjustment for everyone. The senator kept his word, providing a comfortable home in a middle-class neighborhood and caring for Esperanza's every need. But most importantly, he began visiting regularly, initially awkward with the baby, but gradually learning to change diapers, bottle feed, and even sing lullabies. I never did that with Marina, he confessed to Marcos during one of these visits. I always delegated it to nannies and maids. It's never too late to learn, Marcos replied, watching the senator rock Esperanza on his lap. Julia was initially shy around Grandpa, Eduardo, as she began to call him, but soon warmed to his presence. The senator, in turn, was charmed by the girl's personality and began treating her like a granddaughter too. She's extraordinary, he said to Marcos. You're raising an exceptional child. Thank you, Senator. Eduardo, call me Eduardo. We're family now. 2 years passed. Esperanza grew up healthy and happy, a cheerful child who adored both her father, Marcos, and her grandfather, Eduardo. Julia, now 5, was a protective and loving older sister. The family dynamic had settled harmoniously. Eduardo had changed a lot during this period. His political work continued, but his priorities had shifted. He spent more time with his family and less time at empty social events. He also began to get involved in social causes, particularly related to caring for orphan children and vulnerable families. Hope taught me that family isn't about lineage or status, he said over family dinner. It's about love, dedication, and being present. Marcos, who had initially been skeptical of the senator's changes, now genuinely considered him a member of the family. Eduardo had proven his sincerity through actions, not just words. It was during one of these visits that Eduardo brought unexpected news. "Marcos, I need to tell you something about Marina," he said as the girls played in the backyard. "What is it?" "I found some letters she wrote before she died. One of them was to you." Eduardo handed over a sealed envelope. "With the name, 'For whoever takes care of my daughter,' written in shaky handwriting." Marcos opened the letter with trembling hands. "For whoever finds my hope, I know I'm making a difficult decision by leaving her on a stranger's doorstep. But I can't care for her as she deserves. I'm not physically, emotionally, or financially capable of being the mother she needs. I chose your home because I've watched you for a few days. I've seen how you care for your daughter with love and patience. I've seen how kind you are to your neighbors, how hard you work, what a good man you are. Please love my daughter as I wish I could. Teach her to be strong, kind, and independent. If my father ever finds her, and he will because he has the resources, please don't let her grow up with only privilege. She needs to know the value of hard work, humility, and true love. My biggest regret is not being able to be the mother she deserved. My biggest hope is that you'll be the father she needs, with eternal gratitude, Marina Carvalho." Marcos finished reading the letter with tears in his eyes. Eduardo was also moved. "She chose you," Eduardo said. "It wasn't a coincidence. Marina observed you and decided you would be the best father for Esperanza." "How did she notice me?" "The letters mentioned that she lived in a boarding house in the neighborhood during the last weeks of her pregnancy. She must have seen you with Julia." Marcos looked out the window, watching Esperanza play in the backyard. The girl, now 2 years old, chased butterflies while Julia followed, protecting her from any danger. "Eduardo," he said, "thank you for showing me this. Thank you for being the man Marina saw in you." That night, after Eduardo left and the girls were asleep, Marcos reflected on everything that had happened since that cold December night. Hope had come into his life as an unexpected gift, but now he realized it had actually been carefully placed there by a desperate mother who had made the best choice possible in an impossible situation. 3 years later, when Esperanza was 5 and Julia was 8, the family dynamic was fully established. Eduardo was a present and loving grandfather, but respected Marcos's role as primary parent. The family had found a perfect balance between both worlds. Esperanza had access to the best educational and health opportunities, but grew up in an environment of solid values and unconditional love. "Daddy," Hope asked one day, "why do I have 2 last names?" Marcos had prepared himself for this question. "Because you have 2 families who love you, princess. The Carvalho family who gave you life, and the Silva family who raised you with love. And my mum, who had me in her belly. Your mum, Marina, loved you very much, but she couldn't take care of you, so she asked God to help me find you. And God heard? God always listens." Esperanza seemed satisfied with the explanation and went back to playing. Marcos smiled, knowing that as she grew older, he would share more details of the story, always in an age-appropriate way. Eduardo, who had overheard the conversation from the kitchen, approached. "You have a wonderful way of explaining complex things to her." "I learned through practice," Marcos smiled. "Julia was always very curious too." "Marcos, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "Marina would have been so proud to see how Esperanza is growing, and I'm grateful every day that you opened your door that night." "Me too, Eduardo. That girl saved my life as much as I saved hers," Eduardo laughed. "What do you mean? After Anna died, I was just surviving, not living. Taking care of Julia, but without hope for the future. Hope brought light back to our home, a new purpose for my life, and you became a part of that too. A very different family than I imagined when I was young," Eduardo reflected. "The best families are the ones life creates for us, not the ones we plan." That night, After everyone went to bed, Marcos went out into the backyard and looked at the stars. He did this sometimes when he wanted to talk to Anna or simply reflect on how life had changed. "Anna," he whispered to the sky, "I hope you're proud of how our family has grown. Esperanza is a wonderful girl, and Julia has become an incredible sister. Eduardo has become more than a grandfather. He's become a true friend. I know you would have loved them all." A gentle breeze swayed the trees in the backyard, and Marcos chose to interpret it as a sign of approval. 5 years after their first meeting, when Esperanza turned 7, the family decided to throw a special party. It was also the 7th anniversary of her arrival in their lives, a date Eduardo had suggested celebrating as Family Day. "Grandpa Eduardo," Esperanza asked during the party, "did you meet my mom, Marina?" Eduardo was moved. It was the first time she had asked him that question directly. "Yes, I did, Princess. She was my daughter." "Was she pretty?" "Very beautiful, and very brave. She loved you very much before you were even born. Why couldn't she stay with me?" Eduardo looked at Marcos, who nodded encouragingly. "Sometimes people get really sick, Princess. Your mommy Marina was sick and knew she couldn't take care of you the way you deserved, so she asked Daddy Marcos to take care of you. And you were sad, very sad. But then I was very happy because I found you and Daddy Marcos and Julia. You taught me how to be happy again." Hope hugged her grandfather tightly. "I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, Princess. More than all the stars in the sky." Marcos watched the scene with a heavy heart. Over the years, Eduardo had proven himself to be more than just a wealthy benefactor. He had become a true member of the family, learning about love, simplicity, and what truly matters in life. Julia, now 10, approached. "Dad, can I tell you something?" "Of course, daughter. I'm happy that hope has appeared at our door. Our family is now more complete. Even having to share attention," Julia laughed. "Dad, love doesn't diminish when it's shared. It only grows." Eduardo smiled. "Your daughter is very wise, Marcos." "She was always special," Marcos agreed, hugging both girls. That night after the party, when they were cleaning the house, Eduardo brought up a subject he had been avoiding for a long time. "Marcos, I need to talk to you about the future." "What kind of future?" "My will, my estate, Hope's inheritance." Marcos felt uncomfortable. "Eduardo, she's still too little to..." "I know, but I need to get everything organized. I want to make sure that no matter what happens to me, you're protected." "Are you in good health?" "I am, but I'm 67. It's important to plan." Eduardo paused. "I want to divide everything equally between Esperanza and Julia." Marcos was surprised. "Eduardo, you don't need to include Julia. She's my granddaughter too," Eduardo interrupted firmly. "Perhaps not by blood, but by choice. Over the years, she's become as important to me as Esperanza. But your family, the other Oaks, I didn't have any more children after Marina. My estate would have gone to charitable foundations anyway. I'd rather leave it to 2 girls who taught me the true meaning of family." Marcos was moved. "Eduardo, I don't know what to say." "Say you accept. Say you will teach my granddaughters to use this inheritance to do good in the world." "I accept," Marcos said, shaking his friend's hand. The following years passed in relative tranquility. Esperanza grew up knowing her full story, told gradually and appropriately for her age. She never questioned why she had 2 surnames or why her family was different from others. For her, it was normal to have a father who worked with his hands, a sister who protected her, and a grandfather who visited her regularly and always brought interesting gifts. By the time Esperanza turned 10, she already displayed personality traits reminiscent of both Marina and the Silvers. She had the determination and intelligence of the Carvalho family, but also the kindness and humility she had learned from Marcos. She was a popular girl at school, but she never flaunted her privileges. Her classmates knew she had better financial circumstances, but this never created a distance because Esperanza had been raised to value people based on character, not wealth. "Dad," she said one day when she came home from school, "my teacher said you should run for principal. She said you have very good ideas about education." Marcos laughed. "Me, director? Daughter, I'm a hospital security guard." "So what? Grandpa Eduardo always says that intelligence has nothing to do with a degree." Eduardo, who had arrived for dinner, overheard the conversation. "Hope is right, Marcos. Have you ever thought about studying, going to college?" "Eduardo, I'm 36 years old. It's a bit late for this." "Nonsense. I know people who started studying at 50. With your resources now, you could study education, business administration, anything that interests you." The idea kept lingering in Marcos's mind. He had always been intelligent, but circumstances had never allowed him to invest in formal education. Now, with financial stability and family support, perhaps it would be possible. "What do you think?" he asked the girls during dinner. "I think it would be amazing." Julia, now 13, replied excitedly. "You could study with me. We'd be like schoolmates." Hope clapped her hands. "And I could help you with your homework." Eduardo smiled. "And see, you have the support of the whole family." 3 months later, Marcos was enrolled in a pedagogy program at a private university that Eduardo had suggested. Balancing work, studies, and family was challenging, but he discovered he had a genuine passion for education. "You know what's most interesting?" he told Eduardo during one of their nightly conversations. "I always thought I wasn't smart enough for college, but actually I just never had the opportunity." "Opportunity makes all the difference," Eduardo agreed. "That's what I want for Esperanza and Julia, that they never have to choose between dreams and survival." During Marcos's sophomore year of college, something unexpected happened. Eduardo was diagnosed with a heart condition that required surgery. It wasn't serious, but at 70 years old, any surgery carried risks. "I don't want you to worry," he told the family gathered in his home. "It's a routine surgery, but I want to take this opportunity to tell you a few important things." The girls were visibly worried. Eduardo had become a constant and loving presence in their lives. "First," he continued, "I want you to know that these past few years have been the happiest of my life. You have given me something I thought I had lost forever, a real family." "Grandpa," Hope interrupted with tears in her eyes, "don't talk like that. You'll be fine." "Yes, I will, Princess, but it's important to say these things while we can." He looked at Marcos. "Marcos, you've become more than just my granddaughter's guardian. You've become the son I never knew how to father." Marcos was moved. "Eduardo, let me finish. Julia and Esperanza, you taught me that a grandfather is not someone who has the same blood. It's someone who is present, who cares, who loves. You two are my greatest pride." The surgery went well, but the recovery period made Eduardo reflect even more on family and legacy. When he returned home, he had a different vision. "Marcos, I want to change my will again." "Eduardo, you've already done more than..." "It's not about money this time. It's about the name. I want to legally adopt you as my son." Marcos was shocked. "What do you mean?" "There is a legal process for adult adoption. I want you to officially be in Carvalho. I want Julia and Esperanza to officially be my granddaughters. I want you to not only be beneficiaries of my inheritance when I die, but also to carry on the family name." "Eduardo, that's a lot. It's what Marina would have wanted. It's what I want. Would you do me that honor?" After much deliberation and conversations with the girls, Marcos agreed. The process took a few months, but eventually Marcos Silva became Marcos Silva Carvalho, and the girls officially gained the Carvalho surname as well. "Now we are all real Carvalhos," Esperanza said on the day the papers were signed. "We've always been a real family," Marcos corrected. "Now it's just official." By the time Esperanza turned 15, she was already an exceptional young woman. Intelligent, compassionate, determined, but without arrogance. She and Julia, now 18 and about to enter university, were very close despite the age difference. "Dad," Julia said one day, "I've decided what I want to study." "What is it, daughter?" "Social assistance. I want to work with orphan children and families in vulnerable situations." Eduardo, who was present, smiled proudly. "It's a noble choice." Julia, "I learned from you that families are built with love, not money. I want to help other families find their place." Esperanza, who was listening to the conversation, added, "And I want to study law to defend families like ours." Marcos looked at his two daughters, his heart bursting with pride. They had grown up understanding their privileges, but also appreciating what truly matters in life. "You two make me very proud," he said. That night, Marcos graduated with a degree in education. The entire family was present at the graduation ceremony. Eduardo, Julia, Esperanza, and even some neighbors from the old neighborhood who had become family over the years. "Dad," Esperanza said during the party, "remember when you said it was never too late to study?" "I remember. You were right. And do you know why? Why? Because you taught me that we can always choose to start over, to be better, to grow. That's what you did. And that's what I want to do in my life too." Eduardo, "Approach them." "Marcos, do you have any idea how much of an impact you've had on so many people's lives? Like this? You saved Esperanza, taught me how to be a real grandfather, raised Julia to be a wonderful young woman, and now you will influence hundreds of children as a teacher. And it all started because you opened your door to an abandoned baby." Marcos looked around, taking in his family, his friends, the life they had built together. "It wasn't me who saved Esperanza," he finally said. "It was she who saved us. She who brought you into our lives, she who gave us all new purpose." "Maybe they saved each other," Eduardo suggested. "Maybe," Marcos agreed, hugging his two daughters. "The important thing is that we're a complete family now." Years later, when Esperanza graduated in law and Julia in social work, they decided to work together at an NGO Eduardo had founded in Marina's memory. The organization helped vulnerable single mothers and facilitated responsible adoptions. "It's the circle closing," Eduardo, now 78 but still active, observed during the inauguration of the NGO's headquarters. "What do you mean, Grandpa?" Hope asked. "Marina couldn't care for you, but through your story, you too will help other mothers and children find families. It's as if her pain has turned into hope for others." Marcos, now a public school principal and a respected educator, smiled. "Eduardo is right. Sometimes the worst things that happen in our lives turn out to be the best when we look back. And sometimes," Esperanza added, "a baby abandoned on the doorstep of a simple house can change the life of an entire family." That night, the family gathered for dinner as they had every Friday for years. It was a tradition Eduardo had established and one that continued even after the girls grew up and started their own lives. "Guys," Julia announced during dessert, "I have some news." "What news?" Marcos asked. "Carlos and I are getting married, and we're thinking about adopting a child." The table erupted in celebration. Carlos was a young social worker Julia had met in college, and the whole family had fallen in love with him. "A child?" Eduardo asked, excited. "We want to give an orphaned child the same love our father gave to Esperanza and me." Esperanza hugged her sister. "I'm going to be an aunt." And I'm going to be a great-grandfather." Eduardo laughed. Marcos looked at his family and felt immense gratitude. It had all started that cold December, a night when he found an abandoned baby on his doorstep. Now, years later, that baby had grown into a brilliant young lawyer. His biological daughter was about to start her own family, and Eduardo had transformed from a cold politician into a loving grandfather. "Do you know what I learned from this whole story?" Marcos said, raising his glass of juice. "What, Dad?" the two girls asked in unison. "Family isn't about where you're born or how much money you have. It's about who's there for you in difficult times, who loves you unconditionally, and who you choose to love back." Eduardo raised his glass too, and that sometimes God puts the right people in the right place at the right time, even when it seems impossible. And that love multiplies when it is shared, Esperanza added, remembering the words Julia had said years before. "And it's always worth opening the door when someone needs help," Julia added. They toasted, 4 people whom fate had unexpectedly brought together, but who had deliberately chosen to become a true family. Later, when Eduardo and the girls had left, Marcos was left alone in the house, reflecting on everything that had happened. He picked up the letter Marina had left, which he kept framed in his office, and reread it once more. "Marina," he whispered, "I hope you're proud of how Esperanza has grown. She's become everything you hoped for, strong, kind, independent, and most importantly, she's loved, very loved." A gentle breeze blew through the window, ruffling the curtains, and Marcos chose to interpret this as a sign that Marina approved. The next day, he was at his school when one of the teachers approached him with a baby in her arms. "Principal Marcos," she said, "a strange situation has happened. Someone left this baby at the school gate with a note saying they heard you were good with children." Marcos looked at the baby, a boy just a few months old, and smiled. "It seems like history is repeating itself. What do we do? First we call social services. Then we care for him with all the love we can until we find the perfect family for him." As he held the baby, Marcos reflected on how life is full of circles. 20 years ago, he had found hope. Now, as a school principal and experienced father, he was once again in the position of helping an abandoned child. "Don't worry, little one," he whispered to the baby. "You've come to the right place. We'll take good care of you." And so, the story continued, proving that kindness is contagious, that love multiplies when shared, and that sometimes the most unlikely encounters result in the most perfect families.